determination, hard work, diligence, risk, fearless. Join us as Ed Foxworth talks with existing business owners, government, and community leaders to uncover what it takes to become an American entrepreneur.
Hello and welcome to another edition of American Entrepreneur. I'm your host, Ed Foxworth. On this show, we attempt to provide you with insight and examples of success in terms of owning and operating a small business. Today, we're taking a little break from our normal format on entrepreneurship to discuss trends and the environment in which those seeking to help others and themselves operate. There's a widening wealth gap, ongoing trouble in our homes, communities, and schools, on top of challenging opportunities where aspiring and existing business owners cannot gain access to funding to start or expand their business. I sat down with Congressman John Conyers to discuss these socioeconomic dilemmas as he sees them from the past, present, and future. Well, Congressman Conyers, thanks for joining us. Certainly happy to be able to sit down and talk with you about a variety of different things that are happening in the United States economy and social justice and entrepreneurship, of course. And in your long history, congratulations to you, as a matter of fact, on serving for as long as you have, the general community, but certainly here in Detroit. We're excited to learn what your perspective or take is today versus maybe the past and even the present.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad to be with you, and this is an important discussion because we're at a number of crossroads. That sequester that some voted for, thinking that it was so onerous that we would get our act together on the budget and have some kind of grand reconciliation that President Obama has worked so hard reaching out for and not being very successful with, so that now the sequester is in effect, and we're wondering how it's going to affect schools, how it's going to affect jobs, how it's going to affect the economy. We had the former treasurer, U.S. treasurer, suggest that we could lose as many as 750,000 jobs.
Wow.
In a year's period of time. Now, this means that we've got to begin to put more emphasis on the whole issue of creating a full employment society, which I don't think is very difficult. This is the greatest economy that's ever been created in civilization. And putting everybody to work, as well as training people who need additional training to get a good job. And we're not talking about just any kind of jobs. We're talking about jobs that provide health and pension benefits as well.
Sure.
And so I've been working on that kind of legislation and have a number of people that have been with me for years on it. And I think we're making good progress. Now at the same time, we have this remarkable elevation of Rosa Parks to an honor that no woman has had before, that her statue was unveiled in Statuary Hall in the Capitol of the Congress, in which the President himself came out to deliver remarks, is overwhelming for those of us in Detroit that remember Rosa Parks, how she and her husband Raymond moved up from Alabama. I mean, Selma and Montgomery just couldn't hold her any longer, and she moved here. As a matter of fact, she was in my first campaign for Congress.
Yeah.
And she'd walk into the room and have a seat. You know, she was very humble, and she never tried to seek the limelight or solicit press, she would sit there with her smile, and everybody would say, "There's Rosa Parks." And that eventually, she remembered me when I used to go south as an attorney to work with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and Dr. Martin Luther King, whose birthday I sought to have honored by a public legal holiday in his name, which took 18 years.
I know it takes a long time.
Took a long time,
It's moved a lot quicker.
but finally, and it's being celebrated now. It's not just a shopping day or a day off, but we're really going into what King did and how he reignited the civil rights movement itself.
Yeah, and speaking of which, when we go back and you talk about the history of Detroit, and there's this infamous picture that I've seen of Congressman Conyers on top of a car with a bullhorn.
Bus. It was a bus. Yep, with a bullhorn. Yep. I was trying. That was the Detroit riots of, I think it was '67, and we were trying to dissuade the people who were coming out furious that the police had thrown people down the stairs on 12th Street at a place that had been allowed to be operating for a number of years. And my first goal, I remember Jerome Kavanaugh was mayor at that time. My first goal was to see if we could tamp down the incredible fury and rage at what had happened, and somehow it had been published and televised, and people were not in a mood. I must say I was not successful in tempering the mood of rage.
Sure. Now, when you think about the environment and fast forward to today and even what we see on the future, what kind of culture exists out here for us to work in, for those who want to do what the Black Panther movement was all about in self-sufficiency, those who want to start a business, is there an environment that lends itself to that?
There is, but it's under a challenge right now because we have a city that has lost population steadily, and that's because the automobile industry, which started here and which was the basis of our city being so robust, nearly 2 million people. We were crowded and populated, but when the industry started becoming global, we began to retrench, and people started moving out. There are great colonies of Detroiters in like Las Vegas. When you go out there's a whole community of former Detroiters.
Sure.
With that, of course, came increased unemployment, and with that came loss of homes. Mortgages were foreclosed, and we try to cover these things from a legislative perspective. We have an anti-foreclosure law that gives the federal bankruptcy judge the opportunity, under the right circumstances and good faith on the part of the mortgagor, to lower the monthly mortgage note, to reduce the interest rate, to wipe out the arrearage that may be coming. And so we're trying to help in any way that we can. We have that fits into this new 21st century challenge that we have.
And I know that you speak to that because the wealth gap is widening because the poverty levels are continuing to be dismal.
That's right. There are more people now living below the poverty line than ever before. And we have a great difference of view that is exaggerated and compounded because the views of those who want more equality, more fairness, better voter rights protections, not against people wearing sheets, the Ku Klux Klan, but against the administrative ineptitude that requires you to wait 1, 2, sometimes 3 hours to cast a ballot.
Yeah.
That is just as harmful to the voting process as it was in an earlier day when people were treated differently because of the color of their skin.
Sure. And in that time, we were fighting for jobs, justice, education. It's 2013. We're fighting for jobs,
justice and education. And we made the point here that the whole question of where we're going and how fast we're going to go is determined by how much education we're able to get to our young people and to make available to people that want to go back to school. It is the base of our new technology, and that's what we have to deal with. Fortunately, there are facilities in and around the city that accommodate that. We have great learning institutions. We've got to build up our public school system more because more and more people are moving to alternative ways of getting an education, and we have to determine whether or not we can work out a way of moving the city out of its $300 million debt and $14 billion long-term indebtedness. And the challenge is, can we do this without further fragmenting this fabric of community that binds not just Detroit or Metro Detroit, but the whole state of Michigan.
Sure.
I think that we can. I think we have an obligation.
Yeah.
And I talk about jobs, justice, and peace.
Okay.
Because that's what the greatest person I ever had an opportunity to work with, Martin Luther King, talked about.
I'm tired of violence. I've seen too much of it. I've seen hate on the faces of too many sheriffs in the South.
How do we work out this democratic system? And it all turns to me on the hope that people will understand that with a democracy comes the obligation to the best of your ability, pick people for governance in the legislature, as local government, in the Congress and presidency that reflect the direction you want to go. And it was only last November that the overwhelming number of American people said, you know, this young man, Barack Obama, has done a good job, and we're going to give him a second term, even though the economic statistics are not very favorable. Mm-hmm. There were those that were looking at those. The unemployment rate was high. Foreclosures were going on at a massive rate. But he accomplished one thing: health care.
Yes.
And at first, some of us, and I have to say I was included, is that why would you bite off health care as the first major issue to tackle when no other presidents before him recently have been able to do that?
When we return, we'll hear more from House Representative John Conyers, Jr. We'll be right back.
Hello, friends. I'm concerned about the health of our African American community. According to the American Heart Association, our rates of high blood pressure in the U.S. are among the highest in the world. And diabetes, obesity, high cholesterol, physical inactivity, poor nutrition, and smoking are causing us to suffer and die from stroke at alarming rates. In 3 John 2, the Bible says, "Beloved, I pray that you may prosper in all things and be in health, just as your soul prospers." Visit powertoendstroke.org and become empowered to take care of your health. You are the power to end stroke.
I wouldn't have been at this ceremony if I hadn't been at this ceremony first. Unfortunately, nearly 30% of U.S. high school students aren't making it to graduation. And every one of us, every parent, every friend, and neighbor, has the responsibility to provide the support and encouragement they need to make it through. Because we all need to see a lot more of these pictures.
We now continue with American Entrepreneur.
I want to kind of change gears a little bit and talk a little bit more about, your service on the Judicial Committee and what you see happening in the streets today. We got this to carry or not carry kind of stuff, yet we have young people dying in the streets. We really need to obviously address that from the law enforcement standpoint, but also from the community standpoint. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I do. I was with the committee that held hearings extensively on gun violence and the proliferation of guns and what regulations and laws are working and what more are needed to get us on a more peaceful kind of a society. And it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I lamented a few years back, we repealed a ban on assault weapons, which are automatic military-style weapons that shoot off dozens of rounds per minute. You don't go hunting with weapons like that.
Right.
Come on, we all know better than that. And that ban was repealed. And we now are beginning to look at the fact that weapons play an increasing role in the amount of violence that goes on in our cities and elsewhere. What we're trying to do is create a system where the Second Amendment, your right to have a weapon, is tempered by what is in the best interest of all of our citizenry. And I think we can accomplish that. Those are not two opposable goals. We can do that, but we've got to recognize certain fundamental truths.
Yeah.
There are people now that are able to get a weapon that really should not be allowed to get a weapon. And so the first thing we said we've got to do is have registration for everybody with a weapon. Anyone that buys a weapon it has to be registered so that we can track it and we know who's got it. And it's not a matter of just going over to another state where they have a more lenient law and bring back whatever you want.
So what do you see then happening on the community level in our schools? I mean, in our homes, in our communities, there's something going on where whether it's consumerism or some other kind of training that needs to take place amongst young people who are dying in
untold numbers.
Untold numbers.
Right. There needs to be a more focused effort. And again, President Obama stepped right up to the plate on this. Of course, he doesn't have to run again, and so we're now seeing the Barack Obama who inspired us when he first started out, that some of the goals that he wants to try to achieve in these next coming few years are ones that he wants to lead. He is the most transformational president that I've ever worked under, and he does it notwithstanding the incredible assaults upon him. He has more security than any other president has ever had.
Really?
Oh yes. But he realizes that his responsibility to move America as far forward in the 21st century as he can is going to make his legacy last. And if he doesn't, it will, the negative economic statistics will kick in, and they'll say, well, he didn't do that as well as some of his supporters say. But you know, when he came to office, I always have to remind people, we were paying for 2 wars, both unfunded.
Sure.
Creating the deficit. He didn't create the deficit.
Right.
He inherited the deficit.
Right.
And he's done a great job in pulling it together.
Oh, absolutely. And when I think about Congressman Conyers, I'm inspired from what you have accomplished in your long history, and I wonder what inspires you every day to get up and to go and continue fighting that fight.
Well, Martin Luther King influenced me in a way that nobody ever did. You see, when I went south to work with SCLC and met Rosa Parks and Dr. King, I had no idea that I would, because of redistricting and having worked for a member of Congress who is the most senior member in Congress, John Dingell, I was in an opportunity to begin a career. And I said, if I get elected, when I get elected, the first person I'm going to ask to work for me will be Rosa Louise Parks. And to my delight, she accepted.
Excellent.
And she's what motivated me and Dr. King in different ways. King was a genius. He had unlimited skill in all areas. He could organize, he was a great writer, and he was a superb orator. Now, Rosa Parks came at this from a different point of view. She was quiet, unassuming, but down deep was a deep desire on her part to make sure that she did everything that she could to move this struggle forward. And between the two of them, in that Selma to Montgomery march, they reignited the civil rights movement, which was a little bit dormant. And when they brought in that 26-year-old minister from Atlanta to head this up, and Rosa Parks sat on that bus. Well, she sat on the bus, and then they brought him up, and they went for a year. People refused to ride the bus until this age-old tradition of segregated busing ended. And when it ended there in Alabama, it ended everywhere.
Yeah. Final question then, civil rights battles of the future. What do you see kind of going forward?
Well, first of all, in a democracy, there's an incredible impulse for perfection. And that's what we're doing now. We're now doing fine-tuning on a lot of things, including climate change. We have now the challenge of the environment that we didn't used to pay much attention to. We have now the challenge, as we talked about, of keeping weapons under control and not becoming a society that decides, as you alluded to, whether you pack or not pack. Look, I don't think we would feel any more comfortable knowing that everybody around us had weapons as well as us. We now are in a global confrontation in which many other countries and societies are dealing with some of the things that we thought were imperially ours. They were this. Look, we started this. We're moving that. We started automobiles, but now we have to be thinking on a much larger basis, and we've got to pull these 236 nations and 7 billion people together in ways that we never thought of before. And so I support us learning about everything in the world, not just the ancient history part,
Sure.
but what's going on now. And there are a lot of challenges that we've got to address. And I'm so proud that this 44th President of the United States is a man that's looking at what his legacy, what will they say about him? And I think he's making a lot of the right moves.
Well, I think you have made a lot of the right moves, and certainly we look forward to continued work on your behalf as you continue to lead in the U.S. House of Representatives. Thank you for so much service and your time and energy.
What an opportunity to talk with you.
Absolutely, sir.
All right.
Thank you very much. Well, that's it for now. I hope we provided some additional insight on another component of the entrepreneurial experience. Share your comments about the show or tell us why you are an American entrepreneur by sending your emails to myamericanentrepreneur@gmail.com. We just might use your comment on an upcoming show. I'm your host, Ed Foxworth. Thanks for joining me on another edition of American Entrepreneur. And until next time, remember to decide, believe, and pursue.